Oh, hi,
Well,
Julie.
we've enjoyed a book study on the Great Divorce, and I think I've mentioned to all of you before. I read this probably 13, 14 years ago, and I might have read it once before that, years before that, but I didn't. I remembered some of it, and I remembered the basic concepts, but I'm remembering more of this now that I think there's a discussion venue that we have. And I don't know about you all, but these last few chapters, the last half of chapter 11, 12, and 13, and all, um, it some interesting stuff, full of symbolism. I'm not sure I understand all of it, and I'm wanting to hear from all of you your thoughts on this, and those of you who are watching, if you chat in on it, if you have ideas on this. For example, what is the significance of the ghost and the red lizard? What do you think that red lizard's all about? Any of you have any thoughts on that? And Mike, I know you've read this through. You probably had a lot of time to contemplate the red lizard.
And forget things too.
That's the downside of reading it through too early.
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah.
Do you
I
think?
think red
Go ahead.
lizard is sin, evil, that kind of thing.
Is what?
I say that again, Nancy.
I said I think the lizard symbolizes sin,
Okay.
evil, that kind of thing.
Okay.
I thought of it as
Can
representing
you
us.
see?
Yes.
Off and on.
Okay.
I thought of it as representing a specific sin, obviously, that that person didn't want to let go of.
Okay. Okay. That's a good thought too. And I even wondered if because it later would turn into a stallion, because I thought it was going to be killed,
Yeah.
and then it turned into a stallion. So I wondered, was it a form of idolatry, and that it had become that which was beautiful at one time became a demonic form of idolatry. I don't know. I was wondering about that as well. Since it wasn't actually killed, it was transformed. The ghost thought it was going to be killed.
You know what? I think I almost think that it was the ghost struggling with sin. He didn't want to give up that sin. He loved that sin. It was such a struggle for him. It had become part of him. And then when he finally said, yes, you can kill that red lizard, I think it changing into the beautiful stallion was almost showing God, showing almost like a reward for making that going through that terrible struggle and coming up with doing what we would think the right thing is, trying to do away with our sin. I have no idea what I'm talking about, so who knows? But that's what
Well, I was thinking it was interesting because he was so resistant, and then he just finally just cried out, "Help me!" And the second he cried, "Help me," then the angel swooped in, and then it even has this line about lust versus where it says, "Lust is a poor, weak, whispering thing compared with that richness and energy of desire, which will arise when lust has been killed." So it's like by killing the sin, it allowed the true. I'm coming up with thing, which is not what
and I think it was just so us. We struggle with sin. We don't want to give it up. Sin almost becomes our friend sometimes. And finally, when we realize and we shout for help, something happens and we start making that change.
Yeah. What Denise is waiting on this. She's got three things: sin, that addiction, habit, and hang-ups. We want to hang on to it, but no, we need to let go. And then she says, "Yes, Julie, when we finally surrender, God could take over." I was talking with someone today about our tendency sometimes that even religious things can just become another form of us still being in control, of us still not surrendering something, but just trying to correct some behavior. I was suggesting, and Denise, this is kind of to your point, that people who come anonymous, they're not thinking in terms of just modifying behavior. They recognize we have no control over this. We cannot fix this on our own, and we need help. And it's like this guy in the book this ghost finally comes to the place where he realizes, I cannot do this in my own strength. Mm-hmm. And so, okay, kill it, take it. And as you said, Julie, once he cries out for help, then immediately God's there to do that. I think that's pretty powerfully symbolic.
And I don't even think he says, okay, kill it, or okay, take it, does he?
Did he just say okay, or
did he?
It was somewhat passive in the way he let go, but yes.
Yeah.
He made it clear the struggle was over.
He gave permission in the end, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it says, the ghost says, don't you want him killed? And then he says, no, not the ghost, the spirit. Then the ghost says, you didn't say anything about killing him at first. I hardly meant to bother you with anything so drastic as that. The spirit says, it's the only way, the angel said, whose burning hands were now very close to the lizard. Shall I kill it? Well, that's a further question. I'm quite open to consider it. But it's a new point, isn't it? I mean, for the moment, I was only thinking about silencing it because up here, well, it's so, quote, damned embarrassing. May I kill it? So the angel is asking to kill it, right? May I kill it?
Right.
Well, there's time to discuss that later. There is no time. May I kill it? Please, I never meant to be such a nuisance. Please, really, don't bother. Look, it's gone. It's gone to sleep. It's on its own accord. I'm sure it'll be all right now. Isn't that, isn't that the rationale of the addiction, right? Oh, it'll be fine. It's working itself out. Thanks ever so much. And then again, may I kill it? And they go back and forth with this. And I'm trying to think. Oh, finally, the angel says, have I your permission? Said the angel to the ghost. I know it will kill me. The ghost says, it won't. But supposing it did, you're right. It would be better to be dead than to live with this creature. That's a powerful place to come to, where we become sick and tired of being sick and tired. And then may I, again, I'm quoting Lewis, damn and blast you. I never thought about that in this realm being something you would talk like. But anyway, go on, can't you? Get it over. Do what you like. So he doesn't actually say, but he gives him permission, right? He gives him permission. But ended whimpering, God help me, God help me. And then the next moment,
I think Lewis's depiction of God as a white stallion is powerful, because stallions are powerful. And we've gone from this red lizard to this light, white, powerful creature.
Yeah.
That is wonderful symbolism.
Yeah. Yeah. And, the white stallion, Jesus returns on a white horse. You've got that powerful imagery in Revelation. Denise says, and it'll hurt for the short run, but better off in the long run. Yeah, which is precisely the point of that, I think. So, yeah, well, we may be on to it. I found it interesting, but
Uh-oh.
You're freezing up, Richard.
We're going to be in trouble if we don't have Richard. Quick, let me look up his questions.
Well, like I was
Got him.
he is frozen.
So I wonder if we're still on if Richard is frozen. But in chapter 12,
I think we might be.
well, let's carry on as if we are. The next question is in chapter 12 and 13, what did you think of the interactions between Sarah and the actor / dwarf? Ugh. I did not like them.
Richard, you're back.
I'm back. Okay. Good. Yeah, I can't tell when I'm back because I wasn't frozen myself.
Yeah, it's yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, Julie, is this the question you're talking about?
Yes.
What did you think about the interaction between Sarah and the actor dwarf? What was the struggle? Yeah, that was kind of a strange one too, didn't you think?
Yeah.
What do you make of that? What is the actor in this? Is that a gigantic ego? Is it the pity that he's praying? That he prays on people with?
Yes, I think it is, and I think it's a being, for lack of a better word, that wants to control and manipulate, and is very, very self-centered.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So the narcissism maybe of this
Right.
part of the person.
Yeah. And Sarah seemed very loving and wanted his kindness, but what she got was this manipulation all the time. And I think that, again, and I think he was struggling, the dwarf was struggling with his need to control and manipulate versus his affection for her. Because I think there was some affection there. It was just that he loved himself too. So much.
Did he seem pretty preoccupied with her lack of just thinking about him all the time while she was in this realm?
Yes.
Right? And so once
he
again,
wanted her to feel sorry.
Yeah.
For him.
That blackmail that he used with pity, right? And once again, we see, and I forget which other character it was, a few chapters back, and if I freeze up, let me know, where the behavior, it starts out as a behavior that is errant, but it doesn't totally consume the person. But if that behavior goes unchecked, then eventually that becomes your whole identity and it takes you over. And it's almost like, I wondered if the growing of the actor and the shrinking of the dwarf to the size of a pussycat or whatever it was almost that, where the pity and his identity, his narcissistic identity, was just taking over.
Well, she talked about how he was that way from being a boy, when he would run up to his room and sulk and have people come up and console him, right? And never want to participate in the joy, but he wanted people to come and be with him in his pity and, like you said, narcissistic self-focus, right?
Yeah.
And she just kept focused. She wasn't buying into his thing. She she said, never mind that, but look at all this joyful, wonderful thing here. And he kept bringing it back, and she wouldn't go there with him, right? She'd been set free from that, as it was. And the whole thing starts with her being this bright light. He's thinking there's another river because he thinks there's this reflection coming off of a river, and it's her that's walking down. So something about what she went through in life, she's this bright light there in that space, right?
Yeah, at first, Mike, I thought it was going to be the Virgin Mary or something.
Right. Yes.
And then it was just Sarah.
And that was just Sarah. A saint.
Sarah, plain and simple. Yeah, I thought that was really interesting. Why do you think that the reader is told hell is smaller than one pebble of your earthly world? And remember, even the way the spirit or the teacher, I forget who, tells the main character, how he got here was just through a little crack, right? Everything's very small in hell. And hell did not have room for Sarah. She could not go there. I mean, it was incapable of receiving her because hell is too small for that. Something to that effect, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I found it interesting, having just read.
There's a sentence in the book.
Darn.
Did I freeze up?
No,
No,
Nancy
Nancy.
did.
Oh, no. Okay. We're taking turns freezing.
No, I'm frozen.
Yeah.
Now you're back.
There you're back.
Am I frozen?
You were.
You know, my take on it was that in the end, I think what he's saying is that the misery of others does not have to be the basis of our own sense of self-worth or our own salvation. Hell is very small when we compare it to the joy we have on earth now and in heaven.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I was thinking that the way that the goodness multiplies, like all of her goodness just multiplied to where she was just being followed by this multitude, right? And because he talked about the ripples, that concentric circles, didn't he, that go out from good works or goodness. But I don't think hell has that same advantage, does it? In fact, sometimes evil makes good even gooder.
Gooder? I like
Gooder.
it. Yeah,
Let's put
I
you
like
It's
that.
up to you, Richard.
That gives dramatic effect to it. I like
Yes.
that. That's gooder.
Even more
Yeah.
good.
That spreads it on gooder.
Yeah.
Now, there's a sentence in the book and about this, and it says, "For a damned soul is nearly nothing; it is shut up in itself." And I think that part of what he's trying to tell us is, when you're consumed with this evil, you shut up into yourself because you can't see anything else, and so you get so small. Because self-content, you can't have anything else. You can't have the joy, the light, all that stuff. I thought that was a real interesting sentence, that you shut up into yourself.
Yeah. You know, Nancy, that's interesting. And I having just finished this book recently on the 5 equations that changed the world, and the last one was Einstein, and just kind of refreshing my thinking on the theory of relativity and all of that. And I can get in over my head real fast on this, but the basic idea, even that allowed the splitting of the atom and all of that would follow, is that with the greater the speed, and if we could travel the speed of light, matter actually expands. Things get larger. And I was thinking of that in context with the light of God, that the closer we draw to the light, things expand rather than shrink, and that darkness shrinks rather than expands. So I was thinking, it was hard not to read that and almost, think in terms of Einsteinian understanding with light and the expansion of matter, and how as we grow closer to him, our lives expand with joy rather than contract. God is light. I mean, that's so powerful.
Yeah.
Am I frozen?
No,
Okay,
you're just
good.
just very
What's
very
that?
prophetic. You're just very wise in your statements.
There's nothing
We're
to
all
add.
just digesting
Yes,
it.
I think that's wisdom being frozen, being patronized.
I think it's amazing. C.S. Lewis really has nailed human nature. And because can't you see yourself in all of these characters to some extent? Sometimes we're all manipulative. Sometimes we're all more consumed with the evil things, the dark things in our life than the joy. And it's just a reflection of why we need God so much, so that we can break through from those patterns.
Yeah. Yeah, Nancy, I do think that's right, and I think something I've thought about for a number of years, and have mentioned on a few occasions, that I think Jesus did what he did out of love for the Father. Uh, More than love for the world, it was his love for the Father, and the world became the object of the mission of the Father's love, so that Jesus could stand independent of people's reactions to him, walk in perfect love, but it was love to the Father, and then he would bring people into the love for the Father, but he would not be held hostage by anyone's use of blackmail, using pity for blackmail. He was not in any way inhibited or brought into bondage by someone's perversion of love. And I just think that's a learning point for us, that we want our love to first be to the Father. Love God and your neighbor, but we're really bringing neighbor into that love for God, I think, which is very liberating, and freeing.
Well, you can't really truly love our neighbor apart from the love of God. So,
Yeah. Amen.
Yeah.
I think that's right.
Yeah, he talks, if you go back to that chapter on the red lizard, he ends that up by saying, lust is poor, weak, whimpering, whispering thing, compared with that richness and energy of desire, which will arise when lust has been killed. And then he also talks about, and then he brought up, what about the woman that loved her child too much, right? What am I supposed to tell him? No, he said, she didn't love him at all. She loved herself. And if you think the lizard, what a great stallion the lizard became, right? What lust became when it turned and got free just to be desire for God, right?
Right.
You wait till you see what happens when maternal love is set free in the freedom of God, right? So that's the same thing we're talking about, is all of these lusts and all these things that are perverted in how we deal with them. If we're truly putting God at the center, all of them become freed from our perversions of them, and are so much bigger and more powerful than anything we can imagine.
Yeah, that's so good. And I forget if it was just G.K. Chesterton or C.S. Lewis talking about this, but one of them said something to the effect of that a man will say, and he's talking in sexual ways, a man will say, I need a woman. And whether it was Lewis or Chesterton said, that's precisely not what he's wanting. What he's wanting is an apparatus for his own pleasure. Right. What he does not want is a person. And so lust dehumanizes, whereas love humanizes in all of its expressions. It enlarges the person. So it comes back to that same thing. When we're truly loving someone in whatever expression, creates a greater sense of humanness and sacred worth. People in here, let's see, Denise said, let me get it. I don't know why it's. I have to just read it. Nancy, like Pastor said, oh, sorry, I bet you spoke a little bit ago. You got an amen from Nancy.
Nancy.
Yeah, speaking of perverted love, it was so interesting to me that the actor dwarf, I never know which to call that being, he was upset that his wife wasn't sad all this time waiting for him because she missed him so much. Yeah. That's hard to imagine. It's such a shallow love that you would just be wanting that person to be pining away for you that whole time and not joyful.
Yes. But that, back to Nancy's point with that, Julie, that C.S. Lewis, I just marvel at his insight into the human psyche. I mean, once he says these things, it's like, yeah, I see that in me. I see that in all of us as we struggle. But to say that, I just, his insight as he studied human nature was amazing to me.
Well, and how he depicts some of these situations, like at first, the first part of the book, I was wondering, why does he have all these translucent ghosts floating around, And then in these last chapters, several times he said things about they're more solid or they're solidified or something. And you knew, well, that's because they're getting closer to God and they're becoming solid creatures, not these translucent, who know what, So
Yeah, isn't that great?
Depiction.
That's such an opposite way of thinking about it. That whole aspect of the book, that human beings are the ones that are, translucent, and just that the world there is so solid that it actually, we can't walk on it on blades of grass, or it just, that was really turning everything upside down from the way we tend to look at it, like we're concrete and spirits are really nebulous. But and I don't know if that's the right word, but spirits are intangible, right? And we're concrete, and yet it probably is the opposite, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's weird to think about.
it is. I experienced that too. It was like, because culturally we think of ghosts, as floating around, and I mean, there's even a television program about ghosts. I've not seen it, but I've seen the commercial. But we do think of that as sort of being this mystical, vapor-like world. And he turns it on its head. Said, no, they're the solid ones.
And yet when you think about how fleeting our lives are, and just that this earth that we live on is just one aspect of God's creation, then you think, well, it's probably true, but it's the opposite.
Yeah.
So Sarah, I think, kind of sums that up a little bit towards the end of the chapter, when the what is it called, the tragedian, maybe that's it.
Whoa.
The big guy at the end of the chain, right, with the door, right?
Yeah.
The actor.
He was an actor.
He's an actor who focuses on tragedies.
Yes.
It's just easier to say than tragedian.
Tragedian. Yes. He
Anyway.
was an actor. Yeah.
So what were you
Anyway, he had taken over, and the dwarf, that part of him that had any semblance of love was gone. Anyway, she says, if it would help you, if it were possible, I would go down with you into hell. But you cannot bring hell into me.
Yeah.
And then she says, I cannot love a lie. I cannot love the thing which is not. I am in love, and out of it I will not go.
Yes. And Mike, was that in the same context that our main character is having it explained to him that that in the context of love, that doesn't mean that love is willing to say, if something's not blue, we're not willing to say it's blue just because it would make someone feel better or something. I forget I can see it in my head, but I'm not doing a very good job of quoting it. But was that in that same conversation?
Then from that point, then he starts talking to the teacher. Yeah. And he says, some people on earth say the final loss of one soul gives light to all the joy of those who are saved. And then he says, no, the demand of the loveless and the self-imprisoned, that they should be allowed to blackmail the universe till they consent to be happy on their own terms. No one else shall taste joy, that there should be the final power, that hell should be able to veto heaven. That's what the teacher is saying. No, that's not. That's what he says. Well, how can you let somebody stay in that hell they're in? And then the teacher says, well, you can't let that hell blackmail the rest of the world from being able to live in love and happiness, right? I don't know if that was what you were talking about, but and they distinguish between the pity, the different types of pity, but
So,
isn't any pity.
am I frozen?
You a little bit.
You're back now, I think.
I'm trying to get the bag up. I think my internet might be connected. So I'll just ask the question until I get it up. There it is. How effective was Lewis's choice of dream as the means used to discuss heaven and hell? Did that work?
Well, it sure gave him a lot of leeway to play
It
around.
did, didn't it? Yeah. It kept him from being pigeonholed theologically.
Yes.
Interesting.
Mhm.
Because you still don't really know what he thinks theologically about it.
Right.
Just a
Well.
dream. But
Even when he thinks about our human nature and about what God truly is, right?
Yes.
And that love.
well, to Doyle's question, if I can, I kind of modified it, Doyle, but is the Great Divorce as a dream simply a literary device, or do you think it was a revelation to Lewis? Was he making theological points about, hell, earth as being on one side it could be hell, the other it could be heaven, alludes to a type of purgatory. Was this revelation, or was it just a literary device to get us talking?
Well, he wrote this kind of earlier in his writing career, didn't he? Richard's frozen, and he's the one that
I
probably
think he
knows.
wrote it in 1946.
Right.
And then I think like he wrote The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe children's series later, and it seems like maybe some of his ideas might have changed a little. So if it's a revelation, can it change? To me, a revelation implies that it's right because it's revealed, right? So I don't know.
See, I don't think it's theology, because theology, when I look it up, says it's the study of the nature of God and religious belief. For me, this was more about the nature of man and how they struggle with what God is calling them to. So, yeah. Go ahead, Nancy.
I think that he didn't want people to think this is what he thought was heaven and hell. I think he wanted people to think about the bigger issues he was bringing out. Reflect on yourself, your own behavior, your free choice, and how you can experience God's grace if you make the wrong choices. But yet we're so self-centered that oftentimes the people in the stories couldn't make the right choice. And I think he wanted people to see that. And he didn't want people to think it's really what he thought heaven and hell was, because we don't know.
Right. He wanted to get people thinking.
Right.
About themselves and their own actions and reactions to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Am I unfrozen?
Yes,
Yes.
you are.
Okay, Doyle, and I modified the question, but you're the one who asked the question in a little different form. What prompted that?
Well, I thought it was an interesting depiction of heaven versus hell. But the thing that to me was the most significant was that we're saying that everybody that's in hell basically has options to get into heaven. So it wasn't like, okay, I'm going to, whoops, I died. Now I have to go to one place or another. We're all going to go, I'm going to call it purgatory, but that's not a good depiction. But we're all going to go to here first, and then we're going to get basically a choice of where we want to go from there. Because all the characters that were in hell had an option to get out of heaven, to get to heaven. And even those who went back to hell continually had that option to get on the bus and to go to heaven. But for various reasons, they continually said no. Even those who, I took it, had been ridden on the bus several times and still turned around and ultimately said, no, I'm unwilling to give up these things that I think I would have to give up if I wanted to go to heaven.
But
So what I enjoyed about that was the thought that, okay, someone who ends up in hell, if in his at least representation, was that they would be given a chance, and not just a chance, but multiple chances.
Mhm.
And,
And it was
and is that held in tension with the very real consequences, though, of the choices made on earth as creating a bent toward selfishness, narcissism, etc.? That, I mean, very few people chose to stay.
Mhm.
Most wanted to go back, which was because of choices they had made on earth when they were alive.
Mhm.
And what they would have to give up
Right.
if they went to heaven.
Yeah.
And that seemed to be the thing that they didn't want to do. Oh, I'm mad at this person, ergo I don't want to give up that anger, or that I got hurt by them, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you try to parse the theological answers, questions out of this, you miss the bigger picture he's trying to give us,
Yeah.
right? So I'm glad that he didn't go there, and I think if you try to do it, you're just kind of missing the main point he's trying to come at us with, right? So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, along that same line too, Doyle. Do you remember the ghost that was so upset because the murderer was actually up there too, and
Yeah.
that he had a choice too, that he could
Right.
actually get to heaven? And I thought, that's another case where he nailed it. I mean, how many people do we judge? And we'll go, oh, when the reality is we don't really know anything about them or their choice. But the person couldn't understand why the murderer got the same choice he did.
Mm-hmm.
That just shows God's grace. I mean, his grace time and time again.
Right.
It's a thought, though, isn't it? Are we so far along in our faith and in our love for God and others that we would be able to go to heaven with our murderer and be okay with it, right? That makes you think.
Yeah.
And that gets back to the love question. Is our love, as God would have us show it, so big that we could accept that? It's like the people that were killed in the South Carolina church, and how their families immediately forgave the man who killed their family, and there were so many people that couldn't understand that. Well, they were displaying the love God wants us to show.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Same thing with the Amish family, with the Amish community that was attacked.
Mm-hmm.
So, final thoughts. And Mike, one of my final thoughts is to piggyback on something you said. Because of Lewis's approaching it this way, I think it's made this book applicable to generations to follow. Had he approached this from a strictly theological standpoint, I think it would have limited the audience and limited the impact of us being challenged by it and thinking through some of the deeper points from a human nature standpoint.
I got a much better view of God and the nature of God and the nature of man by the way he did it than if we would have gone through a long series of theological,
Right.
exposition. It's just, absolutely.
Yeah.
And this book is going to stay with you. You know how there's so many books you read and you don't remember the next day, but this will stay with me, I know. And the other thing, I was talking to a young man in his 30s or something, 30-something, and he had read the book. And it sort of surprised me. And he found it engaging. I thought, well, that's interesting too. Despite some of the English themes, and sometimes you weren't exactly sure what he was saying, it really is appealing to multi generations. I think.
Mhm.
Well, in my early 30s, I read Mere Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people, yeah, he's very timeless, even though he can be a little hard to read now sometimes because the language is a little different. He's still worth reading. And
Yeah.
I would encourage anyone watching to read.
Right.
The Screw Tape Letters is another one kind of
Mhm.
like this that really makes you think. He's very good at painting pictures, and even his children's series, Chronicles of Narnia,
Yeah, definitely.
really does a
Yep.
wonderful job.
Mhm.
Doyle, any final thoughts?
Just echo what everybody else said.
Yeah. Well, it was a good read, and I hope we didn't do too much of an injustice to it by doing it in just 4 sessions, because there's a lot to talk about in this, I know, but it's just the way things worked out to do. But you all have been very helpful for me just in discussing it, and I find I read things a little differently when I know I'm going to be talking with someone about it.
Mhm.
So I try to read more intentionally and really focus on what's being said in a more serious way. And I found it a great reread
Mhm.
again. And I know Denise is waiting on several things tonight, and I'm reading into that. That's been meaningful to her, and Sherry has been very regular, and others. So I want to thank you all. You've been great. And we're going to take a break now for the month of January. And then I forget in February, I could look it up fast. Julie, do you happen to have the name of the book? Is it Child's Faith or something like that?
Faith of a Child, Faith Like a Child. I'm
There
looking.
you go. I'm following the Ministry Renovare, which Richard Foster founded years ago. They do a 4-book study, discussion studies every year. And so this year I thought, well, I'm going to piggyback on their books. And so the first 2 have been the books they've chosen. This third one I plan on doing in February. So we'll take the month of January off, and then February we'll be up and running again. So until then, all of you, God bless you, and appreciate you so much. Go with God, and God will go with you. Happy New Year.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.